with the conversation that kind of sparked with the registration of ATLUS's new domain, P4RE.JP, which is likely for a Persona 4 remake, comes a conversation about these domains and what they mean, what they are, what any of this actually has to do with ATLUS and the future of their games. And I didn't see much conversation about this, likely because it got shut down pretty quickly, and I think that's a great thing. If you do see any conversation about P4RE.JP, that is almost 100% not ATLUS. To get to the point real quick, whenever ATLUS registers a domain, something like P5B.JP or P5U.JP, it's done through a company called Oname. I think that's how you pronounce it. This holds true for every existing ATLUS domain that I know of, from multiple unannounced or unused ones for P5 spinoffs, as well as existing domains likely as placeholders. P4RE.JP was registered through xserver.jp, which is a different company. It's not impossible for this to be ATLUS, but admittedly, the information doesn't really line up. There are a multitude of other factors differing from their other listings, and that's just too suspicious not to question. In short, this is more likely than not ATLUS. And is probably someone having a little fun getting people in the community riled up. I'm not super well versed in all of this internet domain stuff, but I'm definitely not the first person to point this out. And when you see things like this, it is important to dig a bit deeper, cross-reference information, and figure out if any of this is legitimate before making assumptions.
This work was completed in a single night.
Now, to talk a little bit more about the domains and what they actually mean, even with the registration of P4RE.JP, and I could eat my words on this, but none of this is full indication that ATLUS is close to revealing the project. P3RE.JP did get registered about 3 months before the official reveal, but that's not an indication that the pattern is always going to follow. Again, it's entirely possible, but it's not a guarantee. Regardless, it's very likely the project does exist. ATLUS likes to register domains as placeholders for titles they are either working on, or likely will work on in the future. And it's not unheard of. Persona 6, 8, 9, and 10 all have domains registered under the same specifications. Funnily enough, there does exist a Persona 7 domain, but it's not under the same umbrella. What I'm trying to say here is that just because the domain exists does not mean we're actually going to get a game from it, nor does it mean a game is even being worked on or planned at the moment. You can assume that these titles might eventually come to fruition, but outside of a few specific examples, like Persona 3 Reload's registration, a lot of them don't have immediate follow-up.
I suppose I'll get my chance another day.
Well, this just moves the plan up a little.
And there's a lot of assuming we're doing here. As I've said before, Persona 4 Remake is an eventuality. It's not a if it happens, it's a when. And would it really be so soon after Reload? I mean, even a reveal. Reload just came out a year ago. Ultimately, it depends. One thing we might know, as the source of information for this stuff is not official, is that Persona 3 Reload's development wrapped up in spring of 2022. Localization wound up taking a while, unsurprisingly, given how dense Persona games are, meaning the timeline of Reload starts around the end of summer 2019, with development kicking off, and the game finishing up in spring of 2022, and then release about 2 years later, so about 2 years and 8 months of development. Localization and polishing probably took place at the same time, roughly. One thing we don't fully know is if episode Aegis was developed directly after, or just wrapped up fairly recently. I can kind of assume it was more recent on the localization side of things, given we got the initial trailer in Japanese with English subtitles, but either way, my guess is that Persona 4 Remake was greenlit pretty rapidly after P3R finished development. And if that is the case, seeing the game in the next year or two would not really be remotely surprising. However, if the project was not greenlit until the success of Reload, which would also not be surprising given how slowly ATLUS tends to act on things, then we should not be seeing this game for another 2 to 3 years. The somewhat random registration of the domain for Persona 4 Remake might seem suspect, and it could very well be. But it's not a slam dunk, given that a lot of these unused domains exist for P5 spin-offs that don't exist.
Treasure! Huh?
I've covered these a few times in the past, but to give you an update, the remaining domains that exist and registered under ATLUS are Persona 6, Persona 8, Persona 9, Persona 10, P5B, P5M, and P5U. If you remember P4RE.JP, I don't know if I updated on this, but that domain was removed in 2021. There is no Akechi Gaiden game. I don't know where that... I honestly forget where that rumor came from. But we never knew what AG stood for in the first place, and now it doesn't exist anymore. So, no, that's never happening, unless ATLUS re-registers a new domain for it. The obvious P6, 8, 9, and 10 are placeholders for mainline games. It's not surprising they've been registered. They're gonna make those games eventually, guys. P5B, M, and U are for P5 spin-offs that may or may not be in development. Last we heard of P5U was that it had been put on the back burner, likely due to how busy ArcSys is, and maybe other development complications. I'm gonna get a little speculative here, but ArcSys has been expanding to using 3D models for a majority of their games. I couldn't tell you if that takes more work than sprite work, but either way, it's just a lot of work. What this ultimately means for a game like P5 Arena is that you can't really reuse the stuff done in P4 Arena. You would kind of have to rebuild it from the ground up. It's my understanding, because of the, at least in visual terms. You could probably use similar mechanics, but it's probably a lot more difficult because you gotta start from scratch. On top of that, ATLUS would likely want a expansive story mode, and to put it simply, developing the game would be fairly expensive, and fighting games are not the most lucrative venture. At the end of the day, P5 Arena is possibly more trouble than it's worth, unless somehow it manages to attract an incredibly dedicated and big competitive following, in which case it might be worthwhile. But that's a toss-up. That's not the magic for that doesn't happen automatically. You don't make a fighting game and there's a guaranteed giant community behind it. And then P5B and P5M are nothing, as far as we know. I've seen a few people speculate that M could be manga or mobile, but the Persona 5 manga has existed for years now, so there's no reason to make a whole dedicated site for it at this point, and at that point, why not just let the domain disappear into the earth? And P5X is the mobile game, so it can't be for mobile either, because that site already exists. To put it in short, a lot of these domains may just eventually expire and disappear, or ATLUS intends to hold on to them until they are sure that the project they're related to is being dumped into the trash bin. To top this all off, very obvious blanket statement, don't trust everything you read on the internet. The fact that we got P4RE.JP and then suddenly this P5 remake domain just popped up is a bit suspect, not totally uncommon since ATLUS will tend to register a bunch of domains at once, but if you dive a little bit deeper into the details, there's a lot of inconsistencies with it. ATLUS does have a ton of placeholder domains, and the fact that no major Persona news source was commenting on that, it's probably a big red flag. And even if it was ATLUS, it probably would have just been them covering their bases. To be blunt though, I'm very glad that this wasn't a widespread topic brought up. It kind of made a little bit of a wave, but really just kind of dissipated after that. Thankfully, people are smart enough to go and check out whether this is legitimate or not. But if you have any thoughts about future Persona titles, these domains and what they could be, or if you think ATLUS is just gonna let them disintegrate, let me know down in the comments below. As always, you can leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe to the channel for more things Persona, ATLUS, and JRPG related. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. But before I go, I want to make clear that the future of this channel is probably not going to be totally Persona focused. It is very difficult to come up with a new topic for a series that barely gets any traction between game releases. We're at the point right now where ATLUS has been pretty quiet about everything for the past few months, and I have not played P5X in 6 to 8 months. It's hard to play it with a translator. I would deeply prefer a global version, so, you know, when P5X comes back around, we'll talk about it more. But for now, we might try to look into other JRPGs, because it's really difficult to talk about Persona when there's nothing happening. And this is a retread of a topic I covered maybe 3 years ago. So, yeah. Anyways, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.